So I call this the drive-by rogue because you're literally just like so fast. It feels like you have like wheels on your feet. You're just like zooming, and your shift is just like, you know, nitrous. You're just like, you know, darting around, and the damage is just like you're there, and then the next second you're just like gone, and you just leave behind carnage. So it's the drive-by rogue. Yo, what is up, travelers? Sagan Survives here, and today I'm making a rogue build guide video for the Bladedancer. This is for hardcore. We are doing a interesting build here where it's a Bladedancer doing primarily throwing damage with Umbral Blades, and we're also using bleed as well. And I know that is a holy sin to use both damage over time and hit damage, but with the way I think Umbral Blades works, I think that it is best when you use it to apply ailments like bleed. Poison's probably pretty good too, but bleed is the one I prefer, and particularly just because of how it works with the particular stationary sort of it's not really stationary, but the homing nodes that we'll go over later. They're just really good for applying ailments, and then just because we really need to go Bladedancer in order to get the most, for the build in terms of passive tree, hit damage is just going to be a part of the build. So it's one of my favorite builds of all time. It's called Glance My Blows, because when I first made it a few years back, it was like 100% glancing blows chance character that was utilizing this combination of synchronizing strike. Get this out of the way. Synchronizing strike, and this is kind of how the loop works, but you basically, let's restart here. You basically want to just sync strike and then use dash, and that's basically how you're doing most of your damage. It's just really just those two buttons. I have Lethal Mirage down here. Decoy, mainly just because decoy and Lethal Mirage is a iframe, and decoy is really good for just like taking some heat off you if you need it. So those are kind of just throwaway buttons. But anyway, the sync strike dash combination triggers just so many attacks. Shadow Cascade with the throwing nodes, so that's scaling with our throwing damage, and the shadows dropping the Umbral Blades. It just makes for a very potent combination. So it's one of my favorite characters of all time. It's got pretty decent defenses and damage. We're doing empowered monoliths now at level 88. I've been doing them since like level 85 at least, I think. But just statically, because of the Shuriken Blade wall or shield, excuse me, blade shield, where you have 31% armor, which is very respectable. And then with perfection stacks, that will go up as well. So just because we're triggering that so much, we just statically have that. And the only problem is the health is a little bit low. I'd like to see the health at least like 2,000. But the one huge reason why I love this build is because you can really scale it in any customizable way you want. I'm currently using a couple uniques for the build, but that's just because I'm at the end game and I'm just trying to min-max the damage while retaining my core defenses. But you can totally use these types of easy to find items that aren't uniques, and the build will work just fine as well. So it doesn't have a ton of crazy requirements. The only real gear requirement is that you have to use a dagger. And basically, we're bypassing quite a few things with this build with Shadow Cascade, because regularly you have to use dual wielding to use it, but because our shift and shadows are using it, we're technically using it as well when we do it too, but because it's being triggered, we can use a dagger. And the dagger is really great for Umbral Blades because we're hitting so much. We're proccing shadow daggers a lot, so this is boosting the single target damage by a good amount. So this build is awesome because it has really good clear, really good single target, and really good mobility, because when we get going, our movement speed goes up to, on average probably like 100%. And when we're mapping, it kind of drops off a little bit, but the more you attack and hit, the more you keep the haste buff. So our movement speed is pretty high all the time. And so we can move around a lot, and because we have increased cooldown recovery, our shift is only 2 seconds. So all in all, this build has, like I said, really good clear, really good single target damage, really good defenses, and speed and mobility. So it's a very, very fun build, and just a 2-button, kind of a no-brainer build. So anyway, that's a little bit about it on a brief level. We're going to go ahead and get into a boss fight here. This is going to be just an empowered Fallen Outcasts. My gear isn't like necessarily min-max, but it definitely is optimal for a late game setup. So anyway, here, so you just sync strike, hit him with that there, and before you know it, it is taken out just with the raw damage of the shotgunning of Shadow Cascade, mixed in with the Shuriken proc, the shield wall, because that is doing damage when we strike in. With the bleed stacks, with the penetration that we have, with the way we have synchronized strike set up just to basically just support our physical damage. All in all, it makes for a very potent and effective combination. I don't even have to worry even too much about my positioning here, just because, well, number one, this boss is fairly easy, and number two, you just have so much dodge and armor and block chance that it really doesn't matter too much. Your leech is also an insane defense layer. So anyway, you just keep on sync striking on him, letting your Umbral Blades, you know, come in, and then we have Culling Strike as well. So Culling Strike just takes out the bosses like that. Alright, so we're going to get into a map and show you kind of how fun the mapping is with this build. The single target damage is definitely something that can be improved, especially as you, if you want to do like, you know, high corruption pushing, and the ways to do that is basically just like min-maxing the particular legendaries, or excuse me, particular unique items that I'm using right now, the shield and the relic. But yeah, if you're high corruption pushing, you definitely want to be careful in this build, just because the health pool is a little bit low. So if you go into 300 corruption, I would definitely recommend having at least 2,000 health. And like I said, you do that by min-maxing your basically your base items, or excuse me, your implicit items for your bases, making sure you're like getting as many resistances as possible on all your base items. Like for example, right now I have throwing and a melee attack speed, which is just useless, but it's a really good stun avoid, so that's why I'm using it. If I were to be able to update this and get the stun avoid on a resistance necklace, this would help immensely with me being able to fit in some more health somewhere else. Okay, as I was talking about the gearing, like I said, you aren't too constrained. I'll include a loot filter for endgame in this video guide, but you know, as far as what you're looking for when you're leveling, you definitely want to focus more on like throwing damage, because when you level, you're gonna be leveling with Umbral Blade. You get it pretty early on in the experience. I forget exactly what level, but not too bad. You can get this pretty early, but until then, shurikens is totally fine to level with, or actually even acid flask I think is probably the best. But anything throwing damage, like additional throwing, you know, chance to bleed, chance to poison, ailments are really strong in the beginning of the game. So leveling this build is really easy with just going straight throwing with any sort of ailment. And then obviously you want to just get health in the beginning of the game and resistances. And then as you get into the later part, you just switch over to Umbral Blades once you can get your synchronized and your shift going, excuse me, and your cascade going. You really need these four to make this combination really work. So I think you switch around like level 55 or 60 maybe to this full setup here. But as far as Umbral Blades goes, you basically just go to the left first, and you want to get the stationary like homing, and then you want to use a dagger with this build, so that way your Umbral Blade hits, they hit quite a lot, they will be proccing Shadow Dagger, so that's very good. And then you want to get precision cuts as soon as possible for sure, because that will make it feel much better. You can actually like aim your Umbral Blade throw, so that's really strong. This is really important to the build down here, Nightmare Dash, because you get mana back per blade when you shift, and this is going to be really important to maintaining our mana as we're mapping and whatnot. Cut and Leave is good to get, because your hits with Umbral Blades will cause bleeding. And then lastly, Twilight Assault is also essential, because you need to get the ability to throw a third blade, which will enable 3 blades to spin rather than just 2. So as far as you just go left first and then get Piercing Cuts. You can get Piercing Cuts first too, honestly. If it doesn't feel good, just get this right away. And then down here, get the Lethal Darkness. Don't forget Umbral Remnant. I don't know how I forgot to talk about that. And then, yeah, so that's that. So now moving on to Synchronized Strike. This is just kind of like a support skill for us. The most important thing is that we get a Crimson Storm from it. This is basically just going to give you a bunch of bleed chance. And you'll have it up all the time, because we're going to be sync striking all the time. Getting 4 points into this is really important just for the physical shred chance. That will really help with bosses and single target damage. This is really important just to maximize your shadow damage, which is kind of what this build is trying to do. Getting this Umbral Assassination is also very important for the Shadow Dagger on hit. And then just the last 2 points into mana efficiency. We have Armor Shred in this build for free, which is awesome. That's really cool. That'll help in the passive tree. Moving on to Shift here. The most important one to get is down here in Dancing Shadows. When you use melee weapon, you use Shadow Cascade at the end of Shift. So that's what triggers our like whole damage, you know. We're sync striking, creating shadows, we shift, which procs Shadow Cascade, and it does a lot of damage. And then they drop Umbral Blades once they do that, so it's really good. And the cooldown recovery, I feel like getting 3 points here isn't really necessary, but you can go 3 there if you want. But what is necessary is getting 5 points into Sleight of Hand, because this is going to beef up our shield, our blade shield in the Shuriken tree, so it's really important. And then kill threshold here for bossing, really good for this build, because we don't have any other sources of it. Shadow Cascade, the most important one here is you want to get Onslaught at some point, but it really just depends on how you want to play it first. If you want to go melee focused, then you don't need to go up into Dagger Dance right away. But if you're throwing focused like from level 1, then you want to go Dagger Dance as soon as possible, because this will turn it into a throwing attack. So that's really strong for this build, because everything is throwing. This node is really good, Shadow Elegance, just to keep on doing more Shadow Dagger proccing. But basically, the most important thing is to make sure you have 3 points into Careful Assault here in this tree. This will help ensure that we're doing optimal damage with our shadow attacks, and this is like more damage too. So we have 3 shadows when we shift, because we have create 2, and then when we shift we create a third one. So at the time of our Shadow Cascade that's triggered by shift, we have 3 shadows out. So definitely have 3 points there, and then just make sure you have the mana, and that's basically Shadow Cascade. And then shurikens we're basically just using for shield, blade shield. Right here, just a really strong way to beef up our armor. So that's why we have per shuriken spinning around you plus 30% armor. That's really strong. So that's how we maintain such a high, and well, maybe not super high, but a decent level of armor. Just make sure you get the additional shurikens everywhere, bleed chance, because they do damage when they're spinning around us. So they're not insignificant in that way for clear and whatnot, and they proc all the time. So that's basically this setup. For gear, you're really open to being able to do just about anything you want. Increased damage of skills used by shadows is really strong, but even just buffing your own throwing physical damage, or just flat physical damage. I really like to use increased damage of skills used by shadows, because we're beefing up our shadows so much that's my main like damage FX that I like to have. The shred armor is kind of a throwaway, but it does help. And then you just basically, as with most builds, need to make sure you have as percent increased health anywhere and everywhere you can get it. So I've managed to squeeze it in on my helmet and on my chest, which is really strong. And of course, you need to maintain 100% crit avoidance at all times for hardcore. Having minus throwing attack mana cost on a ring is essential for this build. You could probably make it work without, but it just alleviates your mana problems pretty much entirely when you have that. So get it early on in the campaign. And then I'm just using my other ring slot for kind of just a placeholder. This gear is not optimized at all, but I will have an optimized setup as a side, or rather with this particular gear setup, so that you can have a look at what's sort of realistic and what is perfect, you know what I mean? So, but like I said, this shield is really easy to get. You actually can farm it from Fall of the Outcast, the very first monolith. And I got lucky, and I had a +2 legendary and then a +1 here. So same boss drops it, so that makes it really nice for farming. And early on in the game, early on in monoliths, you'll probably get this item, and it's really good. So there is a setup where you can slot this on, take off all of your crit avoidance from other places, and have a totally different setup for this here. So that's an option. This shield is really good for just scaling your bleed damage and getting the bleed on hit. Bleed on hit is what you need for this build. You really don't want like melee hit, you want bleed on hit. And then this chalice here, Valdir's chalice, is really strong for just leech. But even if you don't have these things, you can still use something like this. I have a pretty cool Cradle of the Erased, which is really awesome. This thing basically gives you huge block chance and really good block effectiveness. So this is a really good shield. If you manage to make yourself a good one, this is a good option for shield. If you feel like your damage is just fine and you're taking too much hits, I highly recommend making one of these for your build, because they are, I basically don't take damage when I wear this. So that's really strong. The other important thing about this gear setup right now is I do have this armor mitigation applies the damage over time. When I crafted these, I didn't seal them correctly, so they didn't come out quite right, but this mod is really good, and the way you can fix this is basically just getting another pair that have hopefully a tier 5 or tier 6 affix for this, and just seal that away, put a different prefix on there, and then the endurance, change that to hybrid health. Your glove slot really needs to have hybrid health. It'd be really nice if you could get your boots to have either health or hybrid health. Hybrid health is better. And then increased cooldown recovery speed is necessary on your boots, your belt, and your helmet. One thing to keep in mind about this build is because you're sync striking forward and then you're dashing, you're moving quite a lot of distance away from where you're doing your damage at. So I usually just go back and forth so that way I don't miss loot. So like if I'm attacking some enemies and then I do some damage there, some loot drops back there, I'll loop back around and come pick that loot up. So it's just a good way to usually I just kind of circle back, pick up the loot, and then move forward. So keep that in mind. Alright, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the passives here. And so in Rogue, we just basically, the most important thing is getting the agility nodes down here. Basically just makes it so we do more damage based on our movement speed and also take less damage while we're moving with increased dodge rate. So that's really good. We also need dodge and parry as well. Dodge and parry is very, very good as also. And these are just points to get us there. I do put 5 points into focus fire here, basically just for the dodge rating debuff, and then the extra dex is nice. And then over here, we basically just want to stick on this top part of the tree is where we're going to be at, basically getting 5 points here, additional movement speed, glancing blows, health mainly here, damage, flat damage, and then dodge rating of hit. Damage for shadows, which is really good, and then this here for just bleed chance and physical damage. This isn't like a super great node, but it is good for this build, so we take all 8 points there. We don't need this, don't need this, don't need any of this. I'm putting points into this just to get some additional leech rate. And then this is a really good tree. We want to do as much increased damage as possible, so increased damage at full health is really important. And then you can, put 3 points into this, put 4, depending on your playstyle. I like to put 5 because when you do have moments of just 10 perfection and you're able to keep it for a while, it's very, very strong. And then increased damage as well. And we're getting perfection stacks through melee hits. Keep that in mind. And then I like to have just at least 1 or 2 points here just to get that incremental dodge chance if we go below 70% health. Just to help with making sure we survive. And as I continue to level, I'll probably put more points into there just so basically that means that if you get hit really hard, then you'll just dodge the next attack, giving you enough time to react, like pot or something like that. And then increase damage for shadows. I'm gonna probably include a little bit more mapping here for you guys in this, so you can just kind of see more of the power of the build. But that's kind of it. That's kind of it for me. I hope you guys really enjoyed the build rundown here. I love this build so much, and like I said, you can build it however you want. You're really not constrained to do one specific thing, but if you want to go more of a heavy bleed route, you can pretty much, and even just hit route 2, you can pretty much just copy the build that I've presented here. So anyway, travelers, thanks a lot for checking it out. If you've watched this far, definitely appreciate you guys' support of watching my videos and subbing to the channel. And as always, I hope that this build will serve you well in your travels in Eterra. But until next time, travelers, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.